Welcome to our AEM Series 2 live training session part 6 using our RB25 swapped Nissan S14. Now in the last video we looked at our boost control calibration process. We have our boost control set up so that we're hitting the target boost that we're after. So at this point we've tuned our idle, part throttle, and full throttle areas of operation for fuel, spark timing, and boost control. Now we're ready to take a look at starting up the engine on day 2, so the engine has been allowed to cool down overnight. We're going to be taking a look at the cranking fuel, the post-start, and the warm-up enrichment, and being able to make adjustments to these if needed. We're also going to take a look at setting up our deceleration fuel cut, our injector phasing, which is going to be where we want to spray the injector. There's a separate table that we haven't talked about or looked at yet. And then setting up a basic two-step control just so this car is going to have something if it wants to go and launch. So there's going to be a lot of little details we're going to be finishing up here. Let's jump into our live training session so we can get started. Welcome back to our live training session here with our RB25 swapped S14 drift car. Now in the last few videos, we've mapped out our full throttle area of operation for fuel, spark timing, boost control, knock control. We've tuned the idle and part throttle areas of operation, so we've covered a whole bunch of details within the calibration process, and essentially at this point, the engine has been tuned. Now we have a few more things to take a look at, and that's what we're going to be covering in this video. The first thing we're going to be dealing with right now is taking a look at the cold start, making sure that the engine's going to crank and fire up in as least amount of cranks as possible. When it fires off, that it's going to have an appropriate air fuel. It's not going to be too rich or too lean. And then as it runs over time and coming up to operating temperature, that the air fuel is going to be reasonable. So we're essentially going to be breaking down cranking fuel, post-start fuel, warm-up enrichment. Now, when we're talking about our post-start and our warm-up enrichment, we can't look at those on a warmed-up engine state when we haven't tuned the main fuel table first. So we always need to review the post-start and warm-up enrichment once the main fuel table has been dialed in, because those will add additional fuel above and beyond the main fuel table. So if the main fuel table isn't tuned right, and we don't have the idle, let's just say our idle air fuel nailed down on a warm engine state, if we're firing it off and we're adding a bunch of fuel in, we might be masking a lean problem, or if we are taking a whole bunch of fuel out, let's say on the warm-up enrichment, we might be masking a rich problem. So we want to make sure that the main fuel table is tuned first, which we already have done that. We know when it's running, it has minimal O2 correction in the closed loop feedback. And now we can evaluate when we fire it off here on day 2. So this is the second day of filming here. I've let the engine sit overnight. It's bone cold. In fact, if we take a look here, we're going to find that the coolant temperature showing here 50 degrees. In the bay here, it's showing about 58 degrees. So they're pretty close to each other. Usually I find that the coolant temperature is going to be a little bit cooler compared to the actual air temperature, and comparison's sake, because the sensor is submerged in fluid, it seems to read a little bit cooler just for kind of most any engine. I've noticed that kind of trend. So we can see we have our coolant temperature cooled down here. Air temperature is cooled down to, this is reading a little bit above ambient. So what I'm seeing on the dyno tower is 58 degrees. It's showing me here 64. The dyno showing me kind of the middle of these two. That's okay. We know that we've went and selected the correct calibration scale for the sensors that we're working with, so I'm going to be trusting that this is going to be accurate. So what we're going to do here is fire off the engine, and we're going to see how many cranks it takes to fire off, and then we're going to just make sure that the air fuel is going to be appropriate, because we know at this point, again, that main fuel table has been tuned. Now, a few things I want to point out. We don't have an air control motor, idle control motor. We're not going to be able to add additional airflow when the engine fires off, because when the engine is cold, it's going to have poor atomization with the fuel. Naturally, the engine will lose power and torque. So if we're talking about our idle area of operation, we need to maintain a certain amount of idle torque to maintain the idle speed that we're after. When we fire off an engine that doesn't have an idle control motor, our idle torque will be lower because the fuel atomization isn't as good as an engine that's been warmed up. So in this situation, we need to add fuel above and beyond what we would find when an engine is fired off warm to be able to compensate for that. Now, when we're talking about our idle torque, and because we're going to lose idle torque, we can gain the idle torque back if we don't have an idle control motor by increasing our spark timing when the engine is cold. We have an ignition correction timing table. If we jump here into our ignition trims, we jump into our coolant ignition trim. This is going to be based on coolant temperature versus how much coolant offset we're adding or subtracting from the main spark timing table. So in this case, right now I'm going to be going here at this particular point, 50 degrees Fahrenheit. We're adding here about 4.6 degrees of ignition timing from whatever is commanded from my main spark timing table. So if my main spark timing table is showing 30, I'll be adding 4.6 to make the total timing at 34.6. By bumping in our spark timing that can increase our idle torque, then this situation, when we're firing it off cold without an idle control motor, we might be able to utilize this spark timing offset to gain some of that lost torque back to stabilize the idle.
if it doesn't want to maintain its own idle speed. So we're gonna have to see what's gonna happen here. I've already adjusted the throttle plate opening before I filmed it, and I had it kind of running fairly well, and I had enough airflow coming into the engine that I think it'll start off and run on its own, but we're gonna find out right now. So we're gonna be evaluating, again, just the air fuel, how it runs, if it's gonna stay running. Now, if you're in a situation where it fires off and it dies, and you have an idle control motor, this is going to be with an idle control motor, chances are you're going to need more fuel. That means that it's going to be lean. If you're cranking the engine over and it takes a lot of cranks to fire off, you have one of two things happening. One, you might not have enough fuel under your cranking tables, or two, you might not be getting stat sync. Now, it's stat sync here. Let's jump back into start in our page. We're going to find our parameter stat.
Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here, and you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.